Welcome to part 2 of this video presentation of B4B for Microsoft Dynamics Great Plains. During this part of the presentation, I will take you through the B4B Administration Console to demonstrate the configuration options within the application. So here I'm going to log into B4B as the designated super user. This is our default system administrator that allows us to gain access to the administrator options. Well, the administrator options are normally fairly static, so once the software has been implemented, then these are fairly low maintenance functions. So I'm going to take you through each one of these options to show you the level of control that we can achieve within B4B. So firstly, I'm going to start here with the user details. So within B4B, we can have any number of named users, and the software license will control the number of concurrent logins. So here I've got a number of named users within the system. And you can see the user is given a user identity, a username, password, and assigned to an operator group to control their role and access within the application. We can also specify an email address on the user record, and this is used during the approval workflow. So before we can consider our users, we should really look at our roles within B4B. And user roles are maintained as operator groups. And within the group maintenance function, we can create any number of operator groups to control segregation of duty within the application. So for example, an operator group may have access to a number of companies, and then we can control which bank formats that particular group of users can use against a particular company. So if I look at my demo group, for example, here we have a lookup into my Great Plains installation, where I only have the one company available, which is the test company. And we can see that this particular group has access to all of these top level functions. So access into the main menu, the ability to extract payments, maintain the archive, and maintain the mappings as well. So a group can have access to one or many companies. We then drill into the second level of permissions, which is the format permissions. And in B4B, when we refer to a format, it's the actual output file format that we're talking about. And within B4B, there are over 300 different bank modules currently available in the library. So here we can see there's a whole host available on my system. Obviously, you would only see the ones here that have been purchased and licensed. And it's now at a format level that we can also control access to the format-specific functions. So setup parameters, bank detail maintenance, creation of the bank file, and so on. So within the security model, we can very quickly create different roles to enforce segregation of duty within the system. Then it's a simple case of assigning a user to the particular role. There's an approval workflow module within B4B, and this is around approving changes to the static bank detail information that's maintained within the B4B system. So all of your vendors and your checkbook bank details must be maintained in B4B, and it's from here that the data is sourced when creating the bank file. And by using B4B as the master for all bank detail maintenance, we can ensure that the correct information is collected and validated based on the bank format that's being used. It also ensures that the information is stored within the B4B database, which is encrypted at a database level for further security. The information can be audited as well, so any changes will be recorded within the B4B Audit Control. And here we can also enforce an approval around those bank detail changes. And the approval can either be at a system level, or we can have different approval details for each company as required. So we've got some approval control parameters here on how we want that approval to be triggered and enforced. And then we also have the ability to enable email notifications to further streamline the approval process. So on making a change to a record within the B4B system, with the approval system enabled, it will automatically email the designated approvers. And then on completing that approval decision, an email will be sent back to the originator. We have some additional company options available in B4B. And this is really an extension to the standard functionality that we have. And here we can enable the sundry or single payment module, which allows us to perform extracts and matching to vendors in a different way. So rather than just purely using the vendor code to match to a bank detail, we can use combinations of vendor and remit to address and so on. We've got some lookup controls here. This is around performance of form loads, so we can filter lookups if required. There's also an extension here where we can incorporate extract set processing. And this is where you may have multiple formats against one company, and you want to dynamically select which bank payment module will be used at runtime. And finally, there's a control here to include the beneficiary's bank account number on the extract report listing, so you can see exactly the bank account that the payment is being mapped to. We can enforce password control within B4B, so we can set up password policies either at a default system level or at individual group level. We can also use a Windows authenticated login within B4B. So when using Windows authenticated login, then the password in B4B is overridden and no policy is required. B4B has its own remittance engine, so we can get the system to produce a fixed remittance document and have that optionally emailed directly to the beneficiary of the payment. So not only are we making the payment via an electronic funds transfer, we can also automatically notify the recipient of the payment exactly the details relating to that payment. So here we can specify whether remittance production is required and then whether we need to email those remittances as well. And again, we can actually have group options here. So you might want to have different email settings for different users, so for different regions and so on. There's a number of reports that are created during the payables process in B4B, so namely an extract payment report and also the create bank file listing to show you exactly the payments that were included in that bank file. These reports can be stored anywhere within the environment, but most commonly we would set a default to store all of the report data within the SQL database. This ensures that the information is then centralized and included when backing up your Dynamics database. We have audit control within B4B, which can be enabled at a company level. And with audit control enabled, it will track changes to these key system areas, so the setup parameters and the bank details. So it will record exactly who made the change and the details relating to that change, the values before and the values after. And then the administrator, the super user, can then produce parameterized reports of that audit data to see exactly who's changing what within the system. Further to this, the audit data is also available to the approvers. So when making their approval decisions, they can interrogate the audit data to see exactly what has been changed at a field level to then support that approval decision. There is a backup and restore facility available within B4B. However, the entire B4B dataset is installed and maintained within your Dynamics SQL database. So therefore, there is no real need to do a regular backup of the B4B data, as long as, of course, you are employing regular backups of your Dynamics database. We often see backup and restore being used during an initial implementation, where we may implement against the test environment first, perform some user acceptance testing, and then on completion of that testing phase, we can take a backup of the configuration, install against your live environment, and restore that backup to give a turnkey solution for going live. And of course, here we have the facility to run the registration. So this is to apply the serialization details, which controls the bank formats that have been licensed and the number of users. Finally, here you'll see there's also a function to link B4B to our PGP encryption tool. But this is very much bank specific in that PGP encryption can only be used for certain banks. And with the PGP encryption tool enabled, it allows us to build a fully encrypted bank file, giving you the most secure and robust form of data transfer to your bank. So the administrator options within B4B, once they've been implemented, are fairly low maintenance, but there's a lot of control that we can implement here using this functionality. There's some further administration required actually within the user options as well. So if I log in as one of my named users, we can see now we're into the main menu of B4B. And here there are some further setup parameters that we may need to consider. So at this point, the first level of permissions is being applied to control exactly the business units or companies that I have access to, and then the payment modules that I can access under those companies. So if I was to select a payment format, and then my format permissions are applied based on my operator group. So within the user options, there are a couple of setup functions that we need to consider. So firstly, our extract mappings. And this can be a very simple record. What we're saying here is that all payments on this particular company will use this particular payment format for processing. If there are multiple payment modules against a company, then we can configure the mappings accordingly. And the mappings are quite dynamic. We can use wildcards here to ensure that payments are mapped to the correct vendor bank details during the extract process. Finally, from a setup perspective, we have our format parameters. And here we're specifying where the bank file is going to be created. So this can be a local path, it could be a map drive, or a network location, so that when we actually create the bank file, the system knows where that bank file should be written to. We can also identify the payment reference location. So whereabouts on the Great Plains payment transaction should we select the unique payment identifier? And most commonly that would be the invoice number or the document number from the payables transaction. But you can see there are a number of other options available to us. We can apply a payment threshold, so we can put credit control on the process. However, the recommendation here is to normally apply any credit control within Great Plains, so it's applied there rather than in B4B when trying to create the bank file. Audit reference is not available for the Great Plains environment, and this particular ACH format also has an additional parameter where we can include extension records within the bank file. If we're using the remittance engine within B4B, we can also configure that remittance document. Customization is fairly limited, but we do have a number of header lines of text where you can put in the company name, address, contact details, and some footer text as well. We can also change the default labels if needed. So you could maybe create a translated remittance into a local language. And finally, if using the email system, then here we can specify the email subject line and the email body text as well. So extract mappings and format parameters would normally be restricted to an administrator. We wouldn't want regular users changing the mappings or the format parameters, so we'll use the group permissions to restrict these functions. So that really covers the administration console within B4B. Key things here to consider are obviously our groups, our roles within the system, and then any workflow that we may want to enforce. So approval control, audit control, and any extensions to the company options. Part 3 of this video presentation covers the static data maintenance within B4B, the integration options, and also the approval workflow.